We're losing the top part of the screen too. You know, somebody pointed the projector a little bit too much, to the top. Right. So I'm going to get started here. I know people are still going to stream in because this is a full class. The class size is 40, and then we have 20 more people on waitlist, and possibly people beyond the waitlist trying to add to the class. Is anyone here not enrolled and not on the waitlist? So you're wow. Okay. The bad news is I can only add so many people in this class because grading for this class is can be difficult, a little lengthy. The good news is we are now starting to offer this class every semester. So that means fall 2014 this class will be offered again. The bad news again is you cannot escape me because I would be the one teaching that class as well. Okay, so there's bad news, good news, and then bad news again. The first thing I will do, well, not the first thing, but at some point I'm going to pass the roll sheet. So if you find your name, just put your initial next to your name, on the right column, which is dated for today. If you do not find your name on the enrolled list or the wait list, just add your name, here, even though it's not likely that I can add people beyond the wait list. Just add your name here, and we'll see what happens at the end of the class. I'm seeing that everybody has a seat at this point, so as far as the fire department is concerned, it's okay. The dean said, once a class fills up, it's up to me to decide. So this semester they're looking for what we call productivity, which is basically how many students each professor is teaching. So having more students, it will bump that number up. But at the same time, I can only spend so much time on homework assignments and all the grading. So, there's a consideration there as well. So, just put your name here, and I'll see what happens after that. Are there any questions at this point? Yep.
Got a solution for you. Just pick a random assignment. A random assignment and just give everybody an A on it. That'll alleviate some grade.
Tempting. Tempting. All right, so I use Moodle instead of D2L. Okay, so for those of you who have only used D2L before, you just have to change your habit a little bit. Okay, you guys ready? Okay, so we're using Moodle, which is moodle.losrios.edu. And you can probably see the URL at the top of the browser here. If not, I can just write it down because it is kind of important, where that you guys know where to find everything for this class. There's no textbook to buy for this class. All the notes are kind of written by me, and they're all online. I might have pointers pointing to other web pages too, but they're all free. Okay, so there's no textbook to purchase, which is also a bad news, good news kind of thing. It's good news because you don't have to spend the money. It's bad news because, I'm the only one writing it, and I'm not the best writer or editor. All right, but we'll find out. All right. So once you log into Moodle, you will find My Courses, which is on the left-hand side, kind of at the bottom part. And you should find, for people who are currently enrolled in the class, you should find cisp310, Assembly Language Programming for Microcomputers. Just click that, and you should be in the class or the website for this class. Are there any questions at this point? Questions? All right. The next thing I'm going to do, because there are quite a few people on waitlist. So what I'll do is I'm going to make sure that you guys can at least access Moodle, and I have that feature already turned on. So what you need to do is to log into Moodle. Okay, if you're not enrolled in this class, after you log in, it won't show any classes because you're not enrolled in this class, at this point. So what you need to do is to look for this class, and then click the class, and it will ask you, do you want to self-enroll? When you self-enroll, it will ask you for a password, and this is the password. Okay, awesome. Okay, assembly. So that's what you need to self-enroll in this class. Now, self-enrolling in Moodle does not mean that you're on roster. It simply means that you have access to the class material. Is that okay? Does everybody understand the difference between on roster as opposed to having access to Moodle material? Okay. So once we have that out of the way, we'll go ahead and start with the syllabus. It looks really ugly because I put too much stuff on the screen, and that really is hard to read. All right. So this is the syllabus. Once you log in, the syllabus is one of the links at the top, and there are two versions of it. One is an HTML version, which is good for the projector. The other one is a PDF version. If you want to print one out and put it on in your binder, the other version is better for that purpose. So let's go ahead and just kind of go over the syllabus. For those of you who have taken classes from me, there's nothing really new here. But for those of you who have not taken classes from me, some of this information can be useful. Okay, course information, that should be no surprises here. The title is Assembly Language Programming for Microcomputers. Basically, what we're doing is we are using assembly language for the Intel i386 processor family. That's basically what this means. Microcomputers, we don't even use that term anymore, do we? Because the term micro used to refer to those computers being small. Do you consider that box over there small as a computer? No, right? So that's why we don't even use those terms anymore. But universities still expect to see these terms, so that's why we have not changed the title. This course is an introduction to the architecture of microcomputers that use the Intel microprocessor. To be more specific, is the x86 family processor, and I only use the 32-bit instruction set in this class. Topics include machine and assembly language, keyboard and screen manipulation, and so on and so forth. So it just kind of describes what this class is going to cover. In terms of student learning objectives, that's going to be changed later on, but this is what we have printed at this point. The way I look at this class is useless. No. I'm sure most of you are thinking it is a useless class, right? Who is going to program in assembly language, which is almost equivalent of making a castle out of individual grains of sand? Okay? So it's almost useless. Right? I mean, how do you build an app using assembly language? You don't. Okay? For the most part, you do not. So why do we still have classes like this, other than the universities expect classes like that? When I teach a class like that, I don't want to teach a class just because UCs or CSUs want you to have a class taken already before you transfer. Okay, that's to me is pointless. I want you to get something out of this class that is actually useful, practical for your career as well as your other classes. So what do you think? Why assembly language programming is actually practical, or knowing how to is practical? Yep.
So when we're dealing with higher level languages and something goes wrong, we might be able to better debug the code.
Exactly. Okay, exactly. That is the point. How many people have programmed in C++ or C? Okay, doesn't matter which one. Okay, and how many times have you written a program and it contains some kind of a flaw, you don't know what it is, but the symptom of the program cannot be explained by C++ concepts? Very few, okay? Some people, okay? How many people have the experience of having a function, let's say main, calls subroutine f, but when subroutine f returns, it doesn't get back to main, it gets to subroutine g, which you never call in the entire program? Okay? So using C concepts, that cannot be explained at all, right? Or how many times have you encountered the situation where you have a local variable in main calls subroutine f, okay? F does its own thing, doesn't crash at all, it returns back to main. But one of the local variables in main mysteriously got modified. Nobody has encountered those cases? Okay, what that's telling me is you guys have not been using pointers a lot. Okay, in C, C++, if you use pointers a lot, sooner or later you will step on one of these landmines where it cannot be explained. Okay, it just cannot be explained. And what this class is, assembly language programming, is I want to give you the tools so that next time when you have a C, C++ program that uses pointers a lot and it's complicated, and it misbehaves, okay, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and the symptoms cannot be explained using C, C++, or any high-level language concepts, then you have to think about this class. Because this class will give you the X-ray capability to look past the high-level programming language into the implementation of how a program is written at the lowest level. Then you can explain, oh, so my program is just messing up the stack because I'm accessing an array element out of bound, and that's what's causing it to return to a place where it's not supposed to. Okay? Yep, go ahead.
Is it similar to every different type of processor, or is it just?
It's almost universal. You know, the concept is universal, you know, regardless of the processor architecture. So ARM processors, the Intel, 386 processor, it doesn't matter what processor you're using, as long as it has the concept of a stack, and that's how local variables and arguments are stored. Your C program can still mess up exactly the same way and have very similar symptoms. So that part is not architecture dependent, and I'm trying to, when I teach this class, I try to make it as architecture independent as possible. So the concepts apply across almost all popular architectures. Okay. All right. So that's basically what I want to teach in this class is to give you the tools so that you can better debug your C, C++ programs. Information about myself. My first name is Tag. Most people just call me Tag, Dr. Tag, Professor Tag, whatever, because my last name is difficult to pronounce. You have to hear what those automated systems how those systems pronounce my name, because it has 5 vowels kind of in one bunch. A, U, Y, E, U, they're all vowels, or can be considered the vowels. And then we have one consonant at the end. So, it's difficult to pronounce, and it's really a bad approximation of my actual last name anyway. So just call me Tag, that's fine. It's kind of like Sure, just call her Sure, right? Yep.
What country is the name from?
It's Chinese, but it's Cantonese as a dialect. Cantonese particularly is difficult to pronounce to quote-unquote Westerners, because a lot of the sounds in Cantonese is missing in English and most other languages, including Mandarin. So a Mandarin speaker would actually find Cantonese difficult to learn, even though it's Chinese and Chinese, but the dialect is actually difficult to learn. My office is number 7 in Liberal Arts 133, which is that way. Okay, so it's the building on this side of the wall. My office hours are Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, and Thursday from 8 to 9 o'clock. On Friday, I'm not on campus, but if you need to contact me, you can just send me an email. If you cannot meet with me during this time and you feel that you really want to meet with me in person, send me an email and then we can arrange for a time to meet. Typically, right before this class is okay, but I don't have an entire hour before this class, so maybe half an hour, 45 minutes or so before this class would be a good time to meet too, if you need to meet with me in person. Phone number is 484-8250, and this is my email. I'm starting to use Gmail and use one account per semester, so that way it's easy for me to tell, which, it's easier for me to kind of separate my work student email from all the other junk mail that I'm getting. Online classroom is moodle.losreals.edu, we just talked about, and it's on the board itself. All right, any questions about this slide? Any questions? Moving on. So for this class, we are meeting on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 7 to 8:20, and then the lab is from 8:30 to 9:50. I just asked the division dean, and he said, well, lab time is not supposed to be optional. So I'm gonna have some activities for you guys to do during that time. Not gonna take the entire 80 minutes, okay? It's just gonna take a little bit of time, but there will be some lab work that you can do in the lab. Final exam is on the 20th of May from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Okay, so make sure that you have that block of time available for the final exam. All right, so class policies and rules, it has been changed just a little bit. I have added, some links to this part here. This is one document that most people do not even know exists. How many people have read this or even know that, it exists? Some people. Yep, you got the email, right? So it talks about a lot of things that you really should know as a student, both your rights and also your responsibility, resources on campus, and etc. So it's not a bad document to read. I'm not going to read out the entire thing because, as you can see, it's a really, really long document in fine print. But what I want to kind of focus on is, oops, that's the wrong thing. The first thing is acceptable excuses. In other words, what kind of excuses I have to accept? Okay, it's mandatory. There are only three. One is a student being sick himself or herself. Okay, to the point where I cannot really pay attention in class, or I'm contagious. I don't want other students to contract the same sickness from me. The second one is jury duty, and the third one is military duty. And in each case, I want to have, if it is to be excused, I want to have a note or a copy of the summon, a doctor's note, or a copy of the military duty notice. Attendance for this class and for all classes. This is supposed to be district-wide and not only for this class. Students are expected to attend all sessions of their courses. Excessive absence may result in the student being dropped from class by the instructor. A student may be dropped from any class when that student's absences exceed 6% of the total hours of class time. So here's the magic number here, 6%. All right, so how many hours are we supposed to be meeting in this one semester? 54. Okay, so we have 54 hours. And we want to get, what is 6% of 54 hours?
108 times 324, 3.24. 3.24.
3.24 hours. All right. And every time we meet, how many minutes are we meeting? We're meeting 80 minutes, right? Because it's from 7 to 8:20. So there are 80 minutes. So 80 minutes is how many hours?
1.33.
Yep, 1.33 recurring. So if you have 2 missing classes, then it's 2.6, which is still below the limit. The third class that people are missing will bump it to 4, which is exceeding 3.24. So that means people can miss 2 classes without excuses and stay in the class. Are we doing okay so far with that math? Okay. And here is another document that most people do not know because it is an attendance requirement. It's R2222. It's for regulation.
The district policy.
It's district policy, exactly. Okay, it's district wide. The first one is non-attendance at first class. Students who fail to attend the first session of a class may be dropped by the instructor. Do you have to worry about it? No, unless you're watching the video at home and not here, physically, right? 2, excessive absence defined. That's basically what we just talked about. And it also talks about the responsibility of the instructor to talk about it first and not to drop students, without, any prior knowledge of the policy. The third one is interesting because I think logically there are multiple ways to interpret this sentence or this statement. Students who have not attended at least one of the first 3 sessions of a class will be dropped as a no-show following the 3rd session of the class. So the question is, within the first 3 sessions, how many classes can a student miss in order and still stay in the class? None. Okay, I'm glad that we are agreeing on that interpretation because there's an alternative interpretation which is kind of weird. They could have written this statement a little bit differently and make it more clear. All right. If a class is, okay, this does not apply because we are meeting twice a week and not once a week. So that's that. So I'm going to close the links that are not useful anymore. How soon to report an excuse? Well, as soon as possible would be nice, okay? Because I take roll and I would, kind of look at, who's missing the class, who has the 3rd time unexcused and so on and so forth. So it would be nice if you can let me know as soon as possible that you will be missing a class.
Should we remind you, because about the 3rd or 4th week, you're going to forget to take roll, like you do every semester?
Yes, please remind me to take roll. Yes.
Just checking.
Yep.
Memory issues, huh? Memory issues.
Memory issues, and sometimes the topics are way too interesting, right? It's way more interesting than okay, I have to take roll.
Or dry.
Or
dry. Topics are too dry.
Too dry the material?
Yeah.
Oh no, not this class.
He'll start on a topic 5 minutes before class starts, and it'll take us into 30 minutes into the class. It may not even be about what we're supposed to be talking about.
Okay. That's
being honest.
That's some strong comment.
Yep. Well, at any rate, I do tend to forget clerical stuff like taking rolls, grading homework, grading midterms, and so on and so forth. Yep. I call it clerical. Yep. Okay, so what about the other unexcused, reasons? Okay, what if someone has a child and the child is sick and you have to stay home to watch the kid? Okay, well, I have, children, and I understand it happens, okay? So those can be excused as well, but it's up to me to decide. Okay, if it happens too frequently, then we have a problem. What if you get a flat tire? What if your car won't start? Okay, those things definitely happen, and if it's not frequent and there's no pattern, most of the time, I would count those as excused. Okay, not a problem. Okay, we all have things that would happen to us, and we cannot come to class on time or at all occasionally. Okay. Attendance for online classes does not apply because this is not an online class. How many people think, I wish this class is an online class so I don't have to come here? A few, okay. But for most programming classes, online is not a very good option. As far as I'm concerned, it's not, because when I was in college, I absorbed maybe 85-90% of the material in class during lecture. Okay, that's how I learned. So if I were to read a book, I would probably drop to maybe 35-40% of absorption, and not fully understand the material as much as being in class. But different people learn differently, and some people learn from books better than in lecture. And of course, one can also argue that I have had really good professors, and I am not a good one myself. There's always that argument. Attendance for face-to-face classes, I'm just going to rely on my roll sheet here, and it has been 25 minutes. So I'm going to pass this, in the class. Make sure that you, initial your name. If you're not on the wait list, write down your name and initial anyway. because I just want to see how many people there are, and then I'll go to the dean and see, what we can do, about a really, really gigantic class. All right. Classroom and lab behavior. Classrooms and labs are facilities provided only for the scheduled and intended class coursework. So in this case, this classroom at this time is intended for cisp 310. Okay? What was the class before this one? 400.
400.
So it's 400, right? So what if somebody is, working on cisp 400 homework assignments during this time, during this class? Do you think I'm going to walk over and say, hey, you're not supposed to do this in my class? I'm not going to do that, as long as that person is not asking everybody around him or her and say, do you know how to do this? How should I write this class? Okay, as long as it's not disruptive, it's okay. But I don't want anyone to say, well, if it's okay to do homework for cisp 400, I'm going to practice my archery techniques. That is not okay. Okay? Because I don't want to be shot by an arrow, for one. And two, I think it is going to be somewhat disruptive. Which brings us to the next point, right? Any behavior in the classroom or lab that interferes with teaching or learning is not tolerated. People, trying to dodge from arrows, and stuff like that counts, as interference. This includes disruption, bullying, excessive chatting, and etc. And here I just want to go through a few points here. One is kind of funny, but the other one is not. Chatting. Okay, I understand sometimes you need to talk to your whoever is sitting next to you and say can I borrow your pencil? Okay, eraser, stuff like that. Okay, that's okay, not a problem. As long as it's not a pattern, it's not recurring, it doesn't disrupt people around you, it's okay. But persistent chatting is a whole different thing, because people who are around people who are chatting, cannot pay attention, because now there are two sources of, two voices, right? You can either hear the conversation between the students, or you can try to listen to me. And unfortunately, for people who are way out there, okay, my voice does not carry, and I know that. Okay, so if you have someone sitting in front of you who's chatting away, that is going to be a lot louder than my voice, trying to reach all the way over there. Okay, does that make sense? So let's try not to, chat. And I can also understand sometimes I don't explain things well enough, so you may not get it the first time. It's not your fault. It is me not explaining things, well enough. Okay. So in those cases, should you ask the student next to you and have that student to explain to you again, or should you ask me to explain it to you again? Well, ask me, right? Because if you have a problem understanding what I just said, maybe half the class has the same problem, okay? So if you just raise your hand and ask the question, you'll be the hero of the class, or heroine of the class. Does that make sense? Okay, so if it's related to the class material, just go ahead, raise your hand, and let me know. Okay, for those of you who have taken classes already from me, have I ever turned down a hand? No, even when I need to, right? Even when I'm supposed to. You remember last semester?
Yes. Oh.
Who has a question?
I'm so glad it's over.
Yep. Well, we have a student who really does not have the prerequisite to take that class, and therefore there are a lot of questions that should not, be questions, in that particular class. Yep.
Can I explain it further?
Say again?
I won't use specifics, but can I explain it a little bit further?
Go ahead.
We had a student in an Android app development class that didn't understand how to use a computer. And I'm not exaggerating. They had to be taught how to use a computer. And he spent half the class doing that.
Yeah, well, not quite half the class, but
Half the class period.
whenever I ask, is there a question? There's always a question.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is okay, but those questions are not kind of expected in a class at that level. Pets, I don't see any pets today, and I'm hoping that I will not see any pets, during this semester. Okay, there was one class, where I had one student bringing in a dog, to the class. Now, sometimes there are working dogs, sight dogs and whatnot, and it's okay. And those dogs, tend to disappear completely. Once they're in a classroom or in a setting, they're quiet. They just kind of lay down and they just completely disappears. Not this one. Okay, this is a heavy-set dog, and it was panting heavily the entire time. So all I could hear was like that when it was not licking other students. Okay. So it was really disruptive, and I had to tell the student, I cannot let you take this. I cannot let you take the dog to class because it was disruptive in class. Cell phones ringing and stuff like that. So let me just double check and make sure that my phone is not the first one to ring. Okay, I got it on silence mode. That's good. I found a really good app for this sort of thing. It's called Tasker. It's an Android app. I'm pretty sure on iPhones there are equivalent programs. So for those of you who are interested, you can just look for Tasker. Not right now. In the Play Store. Tasker is not really just for silencing your phone. You can actually program it to do things based on time, based on date, based on other things. It's kind of like programming itself, okay, in a weird way. But it's really flexible. It costs $3, but I think it's worth it. I just use it, a lot for various applications. How many people already have Tasker installed? Okay. So do you like it?
Yeah.
Do you use it a lot?
My phone's kind of unstable, so it's kind of slow, so I kind of look at
Okay. Well, I run CyanogenMod 2 nightly. So sometimes my phone would not do things the way I intend.
What phone do you have? What phone do you have?
I have a Blaze, T-Mobile Blaze.
Blaze, you running on that one?
CyanogenMod.
Which one? 3.7? Which one? What ROM?
Which ROM? Nightly, the latest.
Okay.
Bleeding edge. Sometimes it
Is
bleeds.
that up to KitKat yet?
It's KitKat 442.
4.2?
Yep.
I've never liked that thing anyway. I don't know why, but I think it's not interesting at all. The Nexus, when it came in the Nexus version, that was horrible.
Well, it still works, so that's good. No eating or drinking in the classroom. Food and drink items are to be sealed or closed during the lecture or lab session. But there's a sign right here saying no food, drinks, phones, or kids. Okay. On the other hand, if you have just drinking water, I'll make an exception. Okay, it's okay to drink just plain water in this classroom because, well, you don't have any computers in front of you, so it's not like the spill would destroy a computer unless it's yours. So it's okay. Okay, plain drinking water is okay in this classroom. Non-compliant students will be asked to leave the classroom, or else I will have to ask Walter to come here.
Walter.
Do you guys know who's Walter?
No.
It's a disciplinary officer.
Well, he is just, he's just going to be here to, drag out whoever is not complying outside. He used to be a bouncer, I think, in San Jose.
Nice.
So if he can handle that job, I think, he is going to be okay here.
Talking about Walter that works over in the lab? Talking about the Walter.
Yeah, in the lab.
Oh,
Yeah.
Different Walter.
Walter Banner.
Oh.
Yep.
His name is Banner. Nice.
Is it Banner? Bennett. Bennett.
That's more
Yep.
like it.
Conduct code. Okay, so this part refers to mostly, behavior as far as academic honesty is concerned. And, here's a link to the college catalog, so you can read about it over here. Let me see if I can just look for honesty. There we go. So, it has a honesty clause here, that talks about dishonesty such as cheating, plagiarism, or furnishing false information to the college, forgery, alteration, or misuse of college document records and identification. So but, I expand on that a little bit. Academic dishonesty, as far as I'm concerned, is an act of deception in which a student claims credit for work or effort of another person or uses unauthorized material or fabricated information in it in any academic work. It occurs when students attempt to show possession of a level of competency, knowledge, or skill that they do not possess. So what if the competency level that is displayed or shown or demonstrated is lower than the actual? Then it's okay. I really know a lot more than what I show you in the midterm. It's not cheating. That's okay.
So just get a letter grade lower.
But the other way around, is considered, dishonesty. The bottom line is really this. It's an attempt to show possession of a level of competency, knowledge, or skill that is higher than what that student possesses. Okay, that's the bottom line. Any such act will be reported to administration, starting with the dean of BCS. All participants involved in an academic dishonesty will not receive points for the work submitted, and that includes the person who originates the material, as long as that person did so willingly, actively, or otherwise knowingly involved in the attempt. Okay? Activities involving dishonesty do not count for attendance. Okay? So that means, in a midterm case, it will be counted as an absent. By default, in this class, in basically all classes that I teach, if you turn in anything, homework assignments, quizzes, exams, and so on, they're supposed to be done independently. What is independent? It means without the aid of somebody else. Okay? It's also supposed to be original, which means it is without copying or significantly deriving from the work of other people. So are there any questions about these two terms, independent and original? No questions? Okay. And I can and have done so in the past, retroactively re-examine submitted work and graded work for evidence of academic dishonesty. So it has happened in the past, and unfortunately I have to go back into the records and say, well, since I caught these people doing it in one of the exams, now I want to go back to the homework assignments and see if something happened when for the homework assignments. Okay. Are there any questions about this slide? Questions? All right. Let's move on to grading. Okay, this is the part that everybody likes. If someone is getting less than 12.5% of all the points values in this class, that person is getting an F in this class. And between 12.5% and 37.5% is a D. And this is the higher end, which means it's up to but excluding 37.5%. From 37.5% to 62.5% is a C. So getting a C out of this class, is just 37.5%.
Losing that much. Losing that much, right?
No, having that much. If you have 37.5% of all the score, all the points for this class, you get a C out of this class.
Wow.
Yeah. And from 62.5% to 87.5% is a B, and anyone with at least 87.5% of all the point values for this class gets an A. Okay. The distribution of A, B, C, D, F of this class is very close to a similar class at UC Davis. So if you look at the proportion of people getting A, B, C, D, F, it's actually pretty close to UC Davis. ECS, I cannot remember the number, but they do have an assembly language programming class over there. So it's not any easier, okay? It's just scaled differently. Any questions about this part? Questions about this part? All right, let's move on. How the points are broken down. For homework assignments, any type of homework assignments, they all add up to only 20% of your final grade. So only 1/5 of your score or your points in the end come from homework assignments. The final exam accounts for 40%, the first midterm, for first exam accounts for 20%, the second exam accounts for 20% as well. So 80% of the points for this class will come from exams. Only 20% is coming from homework assignments. Yep, go ahead.
The honesty part, you said there will be quizzes. Are there actually going to be quizzes in this?
I usually don't have quizzes in this class.
Okay. So,
Mm-hmm.
When you write an exam or project work, when you write exam 1 or project work, does it mean you might drop the exam and have projects instead? Or do that?
For this class, it's always an exam. This class is exam based. Well, this does give people hope because remember, someone only needs 37.5% to get a C out of this class. The final exam alone is 40%. So that means acing the final exam will guarantee a C for that particular person. No matter how poorly that person has done for the homework assignments, the first exam or the second exam. I have yet to see that happen. Someone who flunked the first 2 exams and not turning any homework assignments, aced the final exam and still pass the class and walk away with a C. It is not a challenge, okay? So don't take it as a challenge and say, I'll be the first one to prove that it can be done, okay? So, don't do it. In theory, it can be done. Exactly. It's not worth it too, right? I mean, if you are really good and can ace the final exam, why not, get, all the point values that you can get and, get a good grade out of this class?
Just to take away your bragging rights.
Say again?
So just to take away your bragging rights.
Ah, okay. I have to crank up the difficulty level, right? Okay, grading FAQs. Okay, this is here. Everything in my syllabus is there for a reason. Okay, so this means in the past, someone has complained to me and say, "Tack, why am I getting such a low score in this exam? Because your answers are wrong." But I spent a lot of time studying, and I can prove it too. Well, let's call this person Adam. Adam, I understand that you have put a lot of time into this class, but if you cannot show me, you cannot demonstrate that you understand these concepts, this is the score that you're getting. And it goes on and on and on. I'm debating whether I will have multiple choice questions or not because they are really easy to grade for a large class. It's very tempting. But what I have learned in the past is, some people can ace multiple choice exams and not really understand the material or not be able to apply the material in the class. So that's why I'm kind of debating whether to use multiple choice questions or not. I have not done that for a long time, but for large classes, it's really, really tempting. Some questions are based on key indicators, which are objective, observable characteristics of the work that you turn in. In this class, there are no late submissions, okay? So you have to turn in your homework on time in order for that to be counted. Okay? Are there any questions? No questions? All right, moving on to section 6, tips. So these are not rules, not something that you have to do. It's just something that I think might be helpful, especially for a class like this. Okay, helping a fellow student. Do you see anywhere so far in the syllabus that I'm going to grade this class on a curve? Only 5% of this entire class can get A's, regardless of the performance of the entire class as a whole. Did I say anything like that? Absolutely not, right? So the scale is absolute. It is relative to what I think is appropriate for a class like this. If the entire class do everything really well, the entire class can get an A. I don't have a problem with that. Okay. On the other hand, if the entire class is doing really poorly, and I think that's not really up to the standard of this class, the entire class can fail this class. That has not happened either. Okay. So typically, I have a fairly nice bell curve for this class, with most people, the majority, getting B's. Okay. A lot of people get A's, but not as many as B's. Okay. So would it hurt if you try to help out a fellow student, assuming the person who's asking for your help is really trying. It's not trying to freeload you or try to waste your time, but really trying, I just don't get this concept. Can you help me? Okay, would it hurt?
No.
Would it help?
So,
It would actually help, okay? From past experience, especially in this particular class, I have seen people who help out other students, who try to explain concepts to other students, would end up getting a much better understanding of the material himself or herself. The person who's helping is getting the benefit as well. Okay? How many of you have that experience? You know, when you try to teach somebody something, you end up getting a better understanding of the same material that you thought that you understood already, right? So it's not like you did not understand the material, but the second time when you try to teach to somebody else, you connect that concept to many other things that you have already learned. So in the end, you are also going to help yourself. All right, so this is back in. No one is missing, except for one person, two people, three, four people on the wait list are missing, but no one who is enrolled in the class is missing. But since we're all sitting down here, so that means the classroom actually has the capacity for everybody in this class at this point. So I'm gonna talk about this with my dean and try to figure out how to deal with this situation. So getting back to helping out a fellow student. But what if the other student is asking you, well, the homework assignment is due in 15 minutes. I haven't gotten started yet. Can you give me your file? What about that?
just honesty, plagiarism.
Exactly, because that that person will be turning in something that will not be independent nor original. Okay, so you don't want to help out a student in that fashion. Okay, you want to make sure the other student be able to do the homework himself or herself. Okay? So that's basically what the slide is about. Is whether how do you help out somebody else in order not for it to be counted as cheating. And to me, that line is really clear. Okay, it's not fuzzy at all. It's basically, are you teaching the techniques, the knowledge, and how to do something to the other person, or are you just giving the solution, the answer to that person, which is not going to help the other person anyway. Okay. All right. How many of you are planning to go to UC Berkeley or some other highly competitive universities? Okay, so this slide may not apply after you transfer. Because in those cases, a lot of classes are graded by curve. Okay, can someone tell me what grading by curve means?
Someone does, if all the class does bad, so the one who has done the less, not that bad, will be given an A, and then everyone else.
It's a quota-based system, right?
There's a distribution of grades. A certain grade will be, it essentially follows a bell curve where a certain number of people will get D's and F's, and a certain number of people will get C's, and a certain number of people will get B's, and a certain number of people will get A's, regardless of what grade they actually get on any test or.
You mean regardless of the score?
Regardless of the score.
Right, exactly. And how often is that grading scheme used at a UC or a CSU?
Fairly often.
Unfortunately, fairly often. Okay, so but this class is not like that. Okay, I'm just grading on an absolute standard.
Basically, you have to be the best in those institutions.
Sorry?
So you have to be the best at those institutions to have an A?
If a class is grading by curve, then you have to be within the top certain percentage to get an A. Another percentage, for B's and so on. In other words, they have quotas. Okay, there's a quota for A's, a quota for B's, a quota for I'm not sure about C, D, and F's. Maybe those are not quota based, but A's definitely quota based. So it is in those situations where people become so competitive, it is counterproductive. Okay, because you don't want to. Nobody wants to help out anybody else. Because if I help you, you may end up getting a better score than I do. So that will bump my grade down, a notch, and I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm going to help you, but I will give you misinformation just to make sure that you don't end up getting a score that is higher than mine.
Speak from experience, Ted?
No, I didn't care one way or another when I was in school.
Did you get help? Or were you the one who got help, or were you the one helping?
I was what you would call the quiet ones.
So you just stay on the side, all the way in the back of the room.
Okay, I confess, I have done really bad things in my class.
Okay.
My professors would prove a theorem on the whiteboard, and I'll be writing it down, and I'll be thinking. Remember, I absorb 85% of the material from lectures, right? So I pay attention in class, I write my notes, I'm really engaged and make sure that I understand everything. And then the professor would make a mistake in the proof somewhere. And I would go with like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. In fact, I think the professor is wrong. Okay? So I would just quietly correct my own notes and not make a sound. But not for the intention of making everybody else having a lower grade. It's just that I did not feel like raising my hand. Yep.
Tell them what your thesis was about.
Stochastic admissible heuristic search.
But tell them what you did to your classmate.
Oh, you mean my lab mate?
Yeah.
Well, that's a story that I can tell later. In fact, you can probably find out, which section of which video clip that I have recorded in the past, and we can just send that to the class. That's the nice thing about recording every single lecture.
And he doesn't have to.
Yep.
It's something embarrassing?
Hmm?
Is it that embarrassing?
No, not to me. Study habits, okay? By this time, because this is after cisp310, and many of you have taken 400 already or taken 400 in the same semester. I'm assuming that you know this stuff already, but I'm going to go through this anyway. First of all, attend classes. It's really kind of important. From my personal experience, this is how I learn, okay, from classes, from lectures. Second, pay attention in class. Just because you're in class doesn't mean that you're paying attention. And I know this is late. Some of you work during the day. By the time you get here, it's kind of late. You're tired. You're hungry. Okay, but still, try. Bring something to take notes. Okay, notebooks. Very good. I see a lot of people, actually, jotting down notes and stuff like that. That's good. Read ahead of me. That is actually kind of important. Read what I will be covering before a lecture will help you prepare for the lecture itself. Now, when you're reading my notes, some people say, but your notes are really terse. I mean, it's really short and to the point. It doesn't really quite explain things well enough. Well, that's okay, because if you understand the general idea of what I'll be teaching in class, that by itself is going to help you absorb the material. It's priming your mind to absorb the material in class. In fact, if you have any questions when you read my notes and say, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, or I think your note is wrong here because I think it's the other way, bring it to me, bring it to my attention in class. Okay, we'll talk about it. If it's my mistake, I'll fix it. I'll explain it. The other thing, which is probably unlikely to happen, is to study the material again, kind of right after the lecture. In other words, when it's still fresh in your mind, try to kind of go over the material just quickly, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that's all it takes to help yourself kind of incorporate the new knowledge, whatever new stuff that I taught in that class, and incorporate it into your mind, into your brain. Okay. Start on homework assignments as soon as possible. For this class, much more so than cisp310 and many other classes that I teach, this is important. Get started early. Okay? Most homework assignments has a due date of 1 week later, which means if you start early, there's another class meeting that you can ask questions. Okay, so if you start early, you have one more class and you can say, well, I'm not quite sure how to proceed with this homework assignment. I'm kind of at this point, I don't know how to proceed from here. Okay, so that gives you one chance to ask questions before the due date. After an assignment is due, study my solution. This is also something that I always do, is after a homework assignment is due, which is usually right before the class. Okay, so it would be like 7 o'clock. So in the class, the first thing I do is to go over the homework assignment, and I will give you the solution, the answer to the homework assignment. Okay, the grading part sometimes is lagging behind. As I said, I kind of procrastinate sometimes. But at least you can compare your solution to my solution. Okay? Now this is a programming class. Typically, your answer would not be identical to mine. but at least you can compare yours to mine and say, well, it's different. They're different, but is it significant? Okay? Is there something that my program will do that your program will not handle? Or vice versa? Why do I do things in a certain way? Is your way of doing things the same or equivalent to the way that I'm doing it? Because there are many ways to do exactly the same thing as far as assembly language programming is concerned. And I also use a lot of in-class examples that are not in my notes. Okay, I just come up with new examples, on the fly in the class. So you might want to go over those again, from time to time. Are there any questions about this slide? Study habits. Yep.
Do you post the solutions online after this
Yes, I do.
assignment's been turned in?
Yep. That also means that I do not recycle questions or homework assignments,
Okay.
as far as I can remember. So over time, if people go back, 10, 20 years or so, maybe I would have forgotten that, oh, you know what, I had this homework assignments, 15 years ago, and here I am, asking people to do exactly the same homework assignment. But whoever is going to spend the time to research all my notes and all my homework assignments for the past 15 years is probably going to pass the class anyway. All right, so section 7 is nothing really important. It's just the tentative schedule of this class. This is one way to look at the class. The other way is go to Moodle and look at the outline in Moodle. And I just follow the outline in Moodle for the most part. And to make this look a little bit better, I'm just gonna hide some of these items here so the main area has more stuff. So this is really the true outline of this class are these links. Okay, you should click on these links. Okay, when you have time, read in that particular order. Okay. Are there any questions about getting to the class material? What if you're on waitlist? Okay, because only enrolled students are in class at this point. If you're on waitlist, you won't be accessing the material. So what are you going to do? I'll show you exactly what you need to do. Okay. So what you will do, I'm going to use a different browser, so that way I don't lose the session here. And by the way, I'm not using Windows. Has anyone noticed that I'm not using Windows? Okay.
Shocked.
Shocked, yes. If I am using Windows, you'll be shocked.
Yeah.
It's like, what happened to tech today?
It was really funny watching you try to use XP.
XP I can, Windows 7, Windows 8, I don't know. I mean, I get lost pretty quickly.
The 8 is only different. 7 and XP were same. Pretty much. Come on. It wasn't that different. It's just all like something so different. 8 is a little different. You don't have the start is not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Start.
Yeah, I hate that. You have to move your cursor all the way there, to get the menu.
In the iPad, like the new laptops and stuff, when I have from HP, like you have a button in the middle and you can just go to all these things right there which you get.
I just install Linux over it.
Okay, that's an easy way to go.
Or I run QEMU or whatever emulator and run Linux in the emulator and maximize the window. So I'll be running Linux for the most part.
Nice.
I'll be pretending, yes. Okay, so sign in. So this part is important for people who are on the wait list or not even on wait list, but you still want to kind of stay in the class for the time being. Okay, so this is how you can self-enroll in this class. Now, when I say self-enroll in this class, I only mean access to Moodle, not to the roster. So doing this does not mean that you're officially in the class, you just have access to class material. So use your W followed by 7-digit student ID and the same password that you use to log into your email account, D2L, and all of the other stuff that you do in this district. Okay, so click login. All right, so after you log in, then you will find that you have no classes. Okay, there's nothing here. So what you do is you go to CISP, and then you look for this class. This is cisp310, which is right here. You give it a click to try to self-enroll, and you will see this portion here to ask you for the enrollment key. The enrollment key for this class is ASM, assembly. Okay, so you just say ASM, and I can show you the text here too. Okay, so that's your password, and you click Enroll Me, and you have access to the class material. You can do the homework, you can basically participate all of the activities in this class. Okay, so this is a quick and easy way for everyone to kind of self-enroll to access Moodle material. So even if you're just on waitlist at this point, you will still be able to access everything that I talk about in this class. Are there any questions about this process? It's all getting recorded anyway, so if you know how to get to the YouTube stuff, you can get to this part. And I haven't talked about that.
Not yet.
I was kind of surprised that nobody points out and say, yeah, but we don't know how to get to YouTube and get to your classes. Okay, so this is how you do it. Okay, you go to YouTube, and I'm pretty sure most of you know how to get to YouTube. Okay, maybe too well. And what you do is you say /SomProfs. SomProfs is SOMEPROFS, one word. That's my channel. And press the Enter key, and that's my channel. So what you want to do is not to browse here, but to click the link or the tab with the caption of videos. And then what you get here would be a list of screen recordings, class recordings, in the reverse chronological order, which means the most recent video clip is listed first. Okay, so that means it's easy to kind of find out what is the latest class. And I always name the clips, the title always has the date, which is year, month, and then date. The class code, which is cisp310 for this class. And since there's only one section, that's it. Okay. If there are multiple sections, I also append something to identify which section we are talking about. So, are there any questions about accessing video clips for this class? What if you want to find out how I taught this class in 2013?
Go all the way back.
Scroll down, right? What about 2012? Scroll further down. So you can, if you want to, watch those video clips and actually get ahead of the class, because that's how I have been teaching this class for years.
How long have you been teaching?
For this class, maybe 6 or so. Yeah, but I haven't started doing screen recording until maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So the screen recordings are only up to 2 or 3 years.
But like you have been teaching CISP for 6 years here on ARC?
All CISP classes?
Yeah.
Since 2000.
Oh.
So that's a long time. Longer time.
14th year, nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, since I'm here already, we'll go over some of the concepts here. The first one is, how do you do homework assignments in this class? In other words, what kind of tools are we going to use in this class? We're going to use Linux, and we are going to use the GNU assembler in this class. If you have a Linux box, if you have Linux already installed on a laptop computer or on your home computer, you can just use that. Okay. But the instructions that I use, or the instructions that I teach in this class, are 32-bit, and most distributions are now 64-bit. So if you don't want to mess around with, how do I convert 32-bit to 64-bit instructions, or what is the equivalence of the 64-bit instruction for this 32-bit instruction, just run a virtual machine. I mean, it's really easy to run a 32-bit virtual machine in a 64-bit environment, especially in Linux. And I can tell you exactly what tools you have to install, and it's pretty easy to do. Yep.
Will it work if you have multi-arch enabled and you have the i3386 library installed?
It would? Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't tried that, so I cannot tell you for sure. All right. So there are several ways to do it. By the time we have to get started with a homework assignment, I will show you, several ways to do it. I personally use a live distribution to teach this class. So the reason why you're seeing, that I'm using Linux is not because Linux is installed on that particular desktop computer. I have Linux installed on a thumb drive, okay, as a read-only media. So I use that to start up the computer. I have an external hard drive as a second drive for persistence, so I can save files. So together with those two drives, I can run Linux the same way on just about any computers that can boot from USB. And can newer machines do a boot from USB 2 or?
If it has
Yeah.
Windows 8 and UEFI, you have to disable secure boot.
Okay.
It's kind of involved.
It's kind of involved, with BIOS settings, right?
Yeah.
But it's reversible.
Otherwise, there's a process by which you could configure a thumb drive to boot up on UEFI, and I'd be happy to teach people how to do that, but I don't think it would take too long to explain it.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thanks for the offer. So that's one way to do it. If you have an older PC, you can just install Linux on that PC. Another solution, which I think is really the best compromise, is to run a virtual machine running Linux in Linux itself or in Windows or in Mac OS X. Okay, that's the easiest solution. And that virtual machine can be really bare bones, with only very few tools to install. So it's not going to take up a lot of processing power. It's not going to take up a lot of disk space. And it's easy to transport, easy to back up. You just back up the image file and you have the entire thing backed up. Okay, so I will, when it's time, I will show you guys how to do that. Okay, in fact, I will give you the virtual machine image file so you don't even have to install Linux yourselves. All right. Oh, I almost forgot this important part. Okay. Before we start with any homework assignments in this class, you will have to acknowledge that you know where to find and you have read the syllabus. So it is in the form of a quiz. It's not an actual quiz. The point value does not count to your grade, but you still have to participate, and answer this question. So if you read the question here, let me just kind of zoom in a little bit. This activity lets you acknowledge that you know where to find the syllabus and that you have visited the links, read and understood the syllabus. Do not submit this choice until you have done all of the above. So you have two choices here. These links are actually obsolete. They're pointing to the old syllabus. Select one. I, the student of the course, my language here is really poorly written here. Basically, I, the student of this class where the syllabus is concerned, acknowledge that I know where to find the syllabus and that I have read and understood the content of the syllabus in its entirety. Okay, you can click this and click submit, or you can click the second one and say, I refuse to acknowledge. Please drop me from this class. So. And it is important that you do this part because some of the, or most of all of the homework assignments will be conditional to the answer to this question. So this is how I make sure that people acknowledge that they know where to find the syllabus and that they understand the syllabus. If you disagree with the syllabus, it's a different thing. Okay, but you will have to know where to find it and understand it. All right. And there's no time limit. You can take your time, to answer this question and ponder upon how you want to answer that question. It's just that before you answer that question, you cannot, access the homework assignments. Oh, for this one, I have to redo this because this is a different account. Okay, so here we have some general documents. Okay, most of the notes as a PDF. Some people print it out and put it into a binder. I have since rewritten some of the chapters. But this is still a good basis for the entire class, okay? But I would not read it, cover to cover because some of the material is out of date and I have not changed it. So it's still good to print it out. Okay. Topic 1, talks about, how do we use Linux in this class. And these links are still active, except they have the older version of QEMU or the older version of Linux in these cases. So you can still download these files, and the first one works with VMware. If you have VMware Workstation installed, you will be able to use the first one. If you use QEMU, which is a free open source emulator, you can use the second one. Each one is a zip file. You have to unzip it to get to the actual disk image file. Yep.
QEMU crashes.
Say again?
QEMU crashes in Windows 8.
It crashes in Windows 8 all the time?
It's intermittent.
Intermittent. We can use you can use
Virtual
VMware.
box.
the VirtualBox will work too. There are ways to convert the image file from one emulator to the next. Here's a link to the live distribution. The nice thing about the live distribution is, you don't have to worry about the operating system and the tools. They're all pre-installed because this is running out of the live distribution. Okay, so it has all the tools. It has browsers. It has word processing stuff. It even has games. Okay, if you go here and go to games, we even have FreeCraft.
What is that?
FreeCraft.
Minecraft. You play it now?
I want to find out. It's basically
Minecraft?
Warcraft.
Oh, Warcraft.
Yeah, it's Warcraft, except it's open source. Yep. So this is all on the live distribution. It has all the assembler, the linker, the makefile utility program, everything that you need for this class. It's all pre-installed, and if I have a new distribution, you just have to reburn the live distribution itself, and everything else will continue to work. Okay.
Do we save that on a flash drive or a DVD?
You save it on a second drive, which is what I call the persistent drive. Okay. I'll show you, how to use the live distribution because I have written some notes for that too. The image writer program is what you need to write an ISO image to a thumb drive. If anyone is interested, I can demonstrate how to do all these steps here. All right, so we kind of talked about this part already, but I'm gonna go over this one more time. Why do we want to learn programming in assembly? Okay. Okay, up to this point, assuming that you have not taken assembly language before this class, or you have work experience working with assembly language, I'm assuming all of you, everybody in this class, have taken cisp310 or a equivalent class. Is that true? Okay, that's a prerequisite for this class. C, C++, Java, PHP, Perl, Python, Visual Basic, and so on, they are considered what we call high-level programming languages. Because for the most part, they're fairly easy to understand. Maybe not to the layman, but to anyone who has taken the class or two, you can understand the program. Okay, if you see a conditional statement, you know what it is. You see a loop, you know what it is. Excuse me. So this means in these languages, constructs are fairly closely resembling logic concepts that people use. You see the if-then-else statement. Okay, if a certain condition, you perform a certain number of statements, and there's an else to tell you what else you're going to do if the condition is not true, right? Well, that's kind of closely resemble how we communicate using natural languages. And those are considered source files. Okay, when you write a program in C, C++, and put it into a file, it is called a source file because it is a source of the specification of the logic that you're trying to specify. What exactly is a source file? Well, a source file is really just a file of ASCII characters. That's it. Okay? Nothing else. In other words, to the processor, it's meaningless. What do you think the processor itself understands? Binary code, zeros and ones. And we are not just talking about, 0101 means add. We are talking about 32, 64 bits to specify any instruction. Now, can we actually write machine code manually?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Do we want to do it? No.
You're crazy.
Okay? Because you would have to look up in a big long table just to find out how do I specify this instruction here, and each instruction can only do a little bit. In other words, this instruction can add 2 numbers. That instruction can compare 2 numbers. Okay? There's no and, there's no or. All of that stuff is high level. Assembly language or machine code cannot deal with a lot of the high level concepts that you use in your C++ programs. So that means when you write programs in C and C++, something is helping you to translate the text representation of logic into a form where the processor can understand. Because the processor can only stand these, really long, awkward strings of zeros and ones. Okay? And we don't want to do the translation because it's really, really tedious. So something is helping you to go from the source code that you use, if statements, while statements, switch statements, and whatnot, into the assembly code or machine code that is all in zeros and ones. Okay, this is the next slide. The next slide talks about what the processor understands. The processor understands what we call machine code or binary code. The code that is natively understood by a processor to us is nothing more than binary patterns, okay? Zeros and ones, long strings of zeros and ones. The binary patterns of instructions are also known as machine code. While a person can write programs in machine code, it is certainly not an efficient use of time. Okay, here comes the question. So what do people have to do before there is an assembler for that architecture?
Write one.
Well, they have to use machine code, right? Okay. Does everybody know what is an Altair computer?
Sure.
Nobody. Okay, you guys need a lesson in the history of computers. Altair computer. Okay, here we go. And we'll just randomly click on one of the images of that particular computer. Okay, view image. Come on, load up. Have you guys been to the computer museum in San Jose? No, neither have I, but I plan to go at some point.
Let's do a field
Okay.
trip. Let's do a field trip.
Field trip. All right. Sounds good. Who's driving?
I drive.
You drive.
Extra credit.
Extra credit.
Extra credit. Yeah, I'll do it for extra credit.
Okay, this is the Altair 8800 computer.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It's a box and there's a bunch of LEDs, a bunch of switches, and that's it. That's the entire computer. We are not missing a keyboard. We are not missing a mouse. We are not missing a screen either. That's the entire computer.
Can you plug this in with a USB?
Oh, I get it. This is Bluetooth enabled.
Oh, okay.
Right? Everything is wireless. You just use your Bluetooth, cell phone to connect to it, and everything is good. No, there's no Bluetooth. No, it has no Wi-Fi either.
No
Okay.
USB ports?
No ports whatsoever. This is
man.
all. This is what you see is what you get.
Just walk
Okay?
through everything.
Punch cards.
So the question now is, how do you program this computer? How do you write a program, not to run it even? How do you get a program into the computer to begin with? That's the
cards.
question.
Punch cards.
Punch cards. There's no punch card here either. There's no punch card reader. Switches, exactly, switches. And that's why it has got a number of switches. So what you do is one bank of switches will be responsible to specify the location in memory that you're trying to program. Okay? Well, on a computer like this, there's probably not a whole lot of addresses. So we are not talking about 32-bit, 36-bit of addresses here. Otherwise, you'll see 36 switches just to specify the address.
8-bit.
Okay?
8-bit, right?
And then there'll be another bank of switches to specify the content that you want to program into that location. So you flip a bunch of switches to specify, I want to program this location in memory. Flip another bunch of switches to specify, this is the content I want to write into that location. There's one switch to specify, I want to write now. Okay? So there's usually a toggle, a momentary switch. Click, click. Now you have just successfully programmed one memory location. Time to move on to the next location. That's how you write a program into a computer like this. Okay? And before that, you have to actually write out the machine code. In other words, you have a sheet of paper with zeros and ones all over the place. And programming, flipping the switches, is really the last step. to get the program into the computer like this. Okay, that's machine code programming. Are we doing okay so far with those concepts? That's low level. It is as low level as it gets. What year is that? That's a good question.
Probably 1988.
No. Okay, I think if I just go back, I can. All right, so we'll go to Wikipedia. Okay.
75.
1975. How many people are kids, in 1975? Okay? And I'm old. So, that's how computers were, back in the past.
So when did they come out with punch cards?
Punch cards already exist in 1975, but because the mechanism, the mechanical part of a punch card reader is expensive, so that's why it's not available for basically personal computers like these. They are available for large mainframe computers because the computers are huge, and having a punch card machine definitely helps to get the programs in.
Wasn't this one of the first attempts to make computers more portable?
More personal, yes.
Personal.
More personal, yep. And it uses the Intel 8080 processor. Do you think it has anything to do with the instruction set that we'll be talking about in this class?
No.
Absolutely. Okay, that's the granddaddy of the Intel i whatever processor that we have today. Okay, it's really kind of interesting, huh? Yep, and these are available only in kit form. In other words, you don't go to an Altair store and buy an Altair computer like you walk into an Apple store and buy an iPad. Okay, they will give you the parts. You have to solder. You have to put the whole thing together. Okay, and that's only 1975.
We're so spoiled.
Exactly. Now, we are running short on time, okay? But I do want to point out one thing, okay? If not anything else, okay, this is a good time to point that out. This is 1975. What type of jet airplane, for passenger purposes, what type of airplane do we have in 1975?
77.
DC-10s, okay? Maybe Boeing 727, something like that?
707 was there for sure. 707 was there for sure.
Okay.
I don't know about the 547 yet.
And do they look dramatically different from, jetliners today?
Not really.
Well, they look different. I mean, the shapes are different, the wings are slightly different. But if you just look at it, would it make a whole lot of difference? Not a
Wasn't the
whole lot.
737 30 years old in 2005?
Hmm?
737, 707, weren't they 30 years old in 2005?
747s are old. Well, 747s are old enough to be retired today. But I think 727s, maybe in the same era of 1975. Okay. Now, what about the jet engines? Okay. I know they keep making progresses with jet engines. Are they dramatically different compared to now? Compared to 75? No. What type of processing power are we talking about here with this box?
Not a lot.
Probably less than your watch.
Those are like kilobytes.
Okay,
Some kilobytes.
probably less than your watch. Okay, so we are talking about Moore's law here, right? I mean, most of you already know what is Moore's law. Moore's law says, every 18 months we will double the amount of processing power, given the same price point, the same cost. Every 18 months we are doubling the amount of processing power. How many 18 months have passed since 1975?
75 is 38, 30, 40.
Just give me an approximate number.
19.
19?
18.66.
So there are 19 18-month periods since 75, right? So if you
25.
look at the price of one of these things and you spend the same amount of money to buy a computer today, we are looking at what type of factor here? Are we looking at 19 times more processing power? Is 2 to the power of 19 the amount of power compared to the one that we have in 1975?
25.
Do you think jet engines, are this much more efficient today? No. Internal combustion engines, I know cars are getting faster and getting cleaner, but are they that much better? Not even close.
But with CPUs, though, the comparison of power is the number of transistors that can be fit on one die.
That's partially the part of the equation, yes.
So, I mean, you'd have to know the number of transistors on that processor and compare it to today. I mean, today it's like billions of transistors on one die.
It doesn't even specify the number of transistors in this machine.
You probably have to look up the actual processor itself.
It does have chips, though. It has 6 LSI chips. Yep, but we are talking about this kind of scale.
25.
Calculator.
What about from now to the time that you graduate from a 4-year program?
4 years.
Processing
4
speed
more
will be
years.
doubled again, at least, right?
Almost.
Yep.
Okay,
So we are talking about.
No,
Sorry?
no, probably no. Because they switch it to mobile processors and they don't invest so much in desktop processors.
You're switching to.
Mobile processors.
Oh yeah, they're focusing mainly on mobile. Like they're trying to shrink everything. So like like our phones are way
They
faster.
cannot shrink anymore because they found that if they cannot shrink transistors anymore, because if they shrink it anymore, they can no longer tell the state of the transistor. We have we have electrons going from one side to another side because of quantum effect at this point. So they cannot make the barrier, the MOS layer, any thinner, and without making the MOS layer any thinner, we cannot make transistors any smaller and use lower voltage. So we have pretty much hit the physical limit in terms of the size of a transistor.
But that's at 10 nanometers. Right now, the current generation is 22.
22.
Yeah.
So we
but
have,
experimental's 10.
but they are also using different technology, using 3D technology, so they can pack more transistor per area. So we thought that we have hit the end of Moore's law years ago. Every year, somebody's going to say, "Oh, we cannot make it any faster," and then doubles, right? And it's just amazing how quickly computers can progress over time compared to everything else. Okay, now why is that important as far as your career is concerned?
You always have to stay ahead.
There'll be more applications, right? Because computers are getting smaller, more efficient, and more inexpensive, which means they can go into more things. Okay, 20 years ago, who would have thought that a torque wrench can be processor based? Okay, does everybody know what is a torque wrench? No? Okay, a torque wrench is a wrench, but you can specify an amount of torque. Now, in the past, it's click based. Okay, if you apply enough torque to the set level, it gives you a click, so okay, this is time to stop putting more torque into whatever you're torquing, whatever you're tightening. These days, we have torque wrenches that have microprocessors in it, so it would display how much torque is being applied. But if you look at the mechanic, how they work, they're not going to look at the torque wrench because they need to hold something with one hand and look at something else, so it can beep, right? Okay. And if it has not been done already, it will be done in, I will give it 1.5 years. Okay, you will have torque wrenches that are Bluetooth enabled. You put on your headset, and the torque wrench will tell you this much torque has now been applied. It's time to stop.
They already have it on the watches, smart watches.
Yeah, but I'm not kidding. I mean, Bluetooth chipsets are inexpensive now. You can actually Bluetooth enable just about anything. Okay, so this is what we are talking about. I know it's not specific to assembly language programming, but this is how things are going. Yep.
I can give you a slightly simpler one that's uncommon. Garage door openers are actually Bluetooth enabled. They sell them. You can, within 200 feet, open your garage door with a Bluetooth device.
And I can use a sniper, a directional antenna, to sniff your traffic too. Yep, that's kind of cool. All right, well, we are running out of time today. For those of you who want to follow me to the lab, I can kind of let you guys know how to use the live distribution. Otherwise, there's no lab activity for today. Oh, so disappointed.